Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Eurythmics. How do you not like the Eurythmics? This is, in addition to being a great song, it happens to be a birthday bumper music request from my friend Dina Prestigiacomo. Her maiden name was Dina Zingaripoli. I think that probably means she's Irish. And this was her birthday bumper music selection. Happy birthday, Dina. I hope you are having a fun day and a good day, and I am hoping that all of your wishes come true today and always. Well, those of us that are interested in the John F. Kennedy assassination got one of our wishes, I don't want to say to come true, but got it to be a little, coming a little bit more to fruition just the other day when President Trump on Thursday made the decision to sign an executive order moving forward with the release of certain documents. I discussed this Friday. Here's a little bit of the president.
Lastly, sir, we have an executive order ordering the declassification of files relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades. And everything will be revealed. Okay? Give that to RFK Jr.
Sir.
So Trump signed the order and directed the pen to be given to RFK Jr., who's been very vocal on the need for what he calls sort of an American equivalent of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to find out what happened, which wherever you come down on the issue of a conspiracy, I think that's probably a good thing. Well, someone that I believe is pretty well acquainted with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is Larry Schnapf. He is a New York attorney who had previously filed a federal lawsuit against President Biden and the National Archives demanding a release of all the classified assassination documents. Larry, it's great to have you back on the program.
Thanks. And that, by the way, that Eurythmics song was one of my favorites as well.
See that? It's it's kismet. Larry, before we discuss what the president did and is doing, what exactly sparked your interest in this case? How long have you been sort of on this case of trying to get these documents revealed?
Well, I mean, I was 10 when the president was shot, and when we heard he was shot, a bunch of my friends, my fellow friends, 10 years old, we went down to the creek behind our house in New Jersey because we heard the assassin was in New Jersey, and we were going to capture him with our Boy Scout knives and ropes. So it goes back that far. But I've been actively involved in trying to get the remaining records released. You know, the JFK Records Act, for the benefit of your listeners, Congress passed the JFK Records Act in 1992 following the Oliver Stone movie JFK to force the government to release the rest of the records that they had about the Kennedy assassination. The review board was established. The agencies were supposed to scour their files for assassination records. The review board was to review these records to determine which ones could be released. Those that could not be released had to be released by October 26, 2017, 25 years after the act was enacted, and obviously, 55 years after the assassination, 54 years. And unfortunately, President Trump postponed the release of the records twice, once in October of 17 and then April of 2018. And then President Biden did 3 more postponements. Some records were released in the process, but a lot of records continued to be postponed. The CIA and the FBI were the principal, and the Department of Defense were the principal agencies seeking postponements, and they were arguing that releasing these records would have an impact or have a harm national security. So my lawsuit, the first lawsuit I filed against the National Archives, was to get all the documentation related to the Trump postponements, and it was very clear what happened during the Trump administration was he was new to government, and the National Security Council was tasked with deciding which records could be released or not. And the statute says that the records should be released unless there's an identifiable harm to national security, which is such gravity that it outweighs the public interest. The National Archives suggested that the records would be released. They felt that the grounds for postponement of the records was not consistent with the statute, but they don't have any power. And they were overruled. The National Security Council basically drafted an executive order for the president to sign, and they did the same thing with Biden.
Mm-hmm. At 30 minutes after the hour, this is The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is Larry Schnapf. Larry, what documents have been concealed after all these years? What are you hoping, at least, as best you can make judgments about documents that are basically under seal? What are you hoping to see and to learn? Well, let me start with that. What documents, how many documents are still under seal?
Well, right now the JFK collection, which is the records that were transmitted to the National Archives pursuant to the JFK Records Act, there's about 3,400 or so records that have not been released. They still have redactions. And they're principally about names. The FBI, for example, has there's names of informants, mafia informants that might have information about the assassination. Those names have been withheld. The CIA, the Department of Defense, there's names have been withheld. There's a huge memo that Arthur Schlesinger Jr. wrote for President Kennedy in 1962 about the CIA. That's been huge chunks of that has been withheld. But the problem is that it's not just the records in the collection. When the Review Board went out of business in 1998, their work was not done. They only had a 4-year period of time, and Congress stopped funding them. So when they went out of business, their work wasn't done. There were still records that they were trying to seek from the CIA, from the FBI, actually from the RFK Family Trust, because when President Kennedy was shot, RFK took the files that were in the Oval Office, grabbed them, and he kept control of them, and then they were put into the JFK library. So there are names of people that have never been interviewed before that might have information about the assassination, and obviously what they're doing and what they've been doing since day one is they're trying to run the clock out on us. So they release the names after they die so that we have no way to interview these people.
Right.
So that's one bucket. The other bucket is there are records out there that have not been put back into the collection. And one important record, for example, is allegedly Carlos Marcello allegedly confessed while he was in jail to a undercover agent who was his cellmate that he was behind the assassination. There was a tape recording of that confession. It was part of the Camtex sting operation, and it's never been released. It's been sealed, and we've been trying to get that released, and that's not in the collection. So even if President Trump gets all the records in the collection released, there are still records that we need to look at that haven't been put in the collection.
As best you're aware, so when the intelligence community gets any president, whether it's Biden or Trump, to go in the opposite direction of disclosure of these documents, Why do they do that? What are they trying to hide? Who are they trying to protect? What's your best guess as to why the intelligence community behaves that way?
Well, one reason is embarrassment. They are probably hiding information that they have about what they knew about Lee Oswald, for example, before the assassination.
Right, but like, if I'm the head of the CIA today, I had nothing to do with the CIA back in 1963. Why do I care about making any of my predecessors look bad? Wouldn't I welcome the opportunity to sort of be the knight on a white horse to bring the cause of disclosure forward?
Because it's protecting the institution. But the other thing that they say, and Pompeo, so actually President Trump changed his story over the years as to why he postponed the records. First, he told Judge Napolitano that if you saw what I saw, you'd know why I did this. Well, the lawsuit that I had with the National Archives showed that he never really saw any of the files. You know, presidents don't draft their executive orders. They're drafted for them. This week on Hannity, and also during the campaign with Joe Rogan, President Trump admitted it was Mike Pompeo who asked him to postpone the records. And what he was saying to the president was, Mr. President, we've made promises to people in the past that we're never going to reveal their names. And if we reveal these names now, even if it's 60 years ago, it could hinder our ability to get new people to give us, to work for us, because if we promise we're not going to reveal their names, they can say, look, you revealed these people's names from 60 years ago. It's a bunch of crap, but when the president is like President Trump said on Hannity on Wednesday, he says, look, Mike Pompeo told me this. There are other people working for the National Security Council. I mean, these are people that have the government's interest at heart. And I just trusted them. And I said, okay. When in fact, they're just, they don't want to release. And this is just, there's a mindset in the government about privacy and classification. We have a problem of overclassification in this country. There are still records from World War I that haven't been released.
Clorox Sentiva smells like lavender. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
All right, that could go on for a while. Experience the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Sentiva. Available in Clorox Sentiva Lavender Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 3 couples, 4 vacations, a lot to unpack. Watch The 4 Seasons, a new series starring comedy favorites Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, and more in a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long-term relationships. Based on the original Alan Alda film. Watch The 4 Seasons, streaming now only on Netflix.
Hannity presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Hannity. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Hannity. Hannity, bring it on.
Wow. If you're just tuning in, this is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. My guest is Larry Schnapf. He has been a warrior in the cause of getting the JFK assassination files released to the public in accordance with the law that was signed over 30 years ago. Larry, I know this might be slightly out of your wheelhouse, but what is your understanding of what documents might be available related to the assassinations of Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr.?
Well, so that's an interesting issue because on a federal level, so the president has the authority to declassify federal records held by the federal government, executive branch records. So the only records that we think we know that for Martin Luther King are the FBI records that they have, and also records of the House Select Assassination Committee that relate to the MLK investigation that they did. Now, there's a dispute. We in our current lawsuit with the government on the Biden postponements, the Department of Justice was taking the position that, we were arguing the president cannot postpone records that are congressional records on separation of powers arguments. And they argued, well, all the records of the Church Committee are executive branch records. I said, great. After President Trump issued this order this week, now we're going to say to them, well, now the president has the authority to release all these records. So the MLK records, most of them are probably FBI records, and then some HSCA records, maybe some Memphis police records. I don't know, to the extent they exist, but the president would not have authority over the Memphis records. Bobby Kennedy's records are principally, as far as I understand, Los Angeles police records. And I don't think the president has the authority to release those records. Now, there might be some records within the federal government, but, they were never collected together like the JFK collection. So we don't know what federal records there are about Robert Kennedy's assassination.
The King family apparently came out publicly and said they'd like to review any documents before they're released to the public. Does that make sense for either the King family or the Kennedy family? Should they get some sort of special preview access before the public does?
Well, the law doesn't require it. The president is free to certify the records once he determines that the public interest outweighs the national security grounds. He could, as a favor, do that. The president's order is a little problematic. It's not as clean and simple as a lot of the media headlines have been. The president did not actually declassify the records. He made a determination that the public interest now calls for the records to be released. And then what he did, he could have simply wrote his executive order could have been one paragraph, and it could have been, I instruct the National Archives to release all the records that it has on the Kennedy assassination. He didn't do that. He said, I'm instructing the Director of National Intelligence and the Attorney General and the Director of National Security Advisor to come up with a plan and in 15 days and present it to the White House counsel. So is the plan going to be simply, here's who's going to be the person that's removing the redactions? Here's the person who's going to notify the archivist that they can release the records? Or are they going to say they're going to do another review? Because that would not be the same as saying we're releasing all the records.
Right. And what is the timeline for that? When are we going to know exactly what the next step and what these agencies are doing is?
So supposedly, the executive order provides for 15 days. The problem is that right now, the Attorney General, the Director of the FBI, and the Director of National Security have not been confirmed by the Congress yet. I don't know this for sure, but I don't think an acting director or an acting FBI director or an acting attorney general has the power to make these kinds of decisions. So I would suspect that the 15 days is going to slip a little bit. But, they're asking, the National Security Council had hijacked the process in Trump 1.0. Now, President Trump did fire 150 people from the National Security Council last week. Hopefully, the people coming in to occupy that office and the people that are going to be now reporting to him will now align themselves with his desire to have these records released. But if it's the same people that are reviewing it from 3 years ago with President Biden, 3 years ago, they came up with transparency plans, which is an Orwellian concept, title. The transparency plans provided that the records could be reviewed, not released, reviewed for release no earlier than the 2040s. Now, the reason Congress passed the JFK Records Act in 1992 was because most of the records wouldn't have been released till 2029. And yet, the transparency plans approved by President Biden would have called for records to be postponed later than the actual original date that Congress was concerned about. So what I'm concerned about is that that President Trump's going to have to really insist that these records that the plan is purely mechanical and ministerial. It's just how we're going to release the records and not involve a review. Because if they're going to redo a review, the problem is that the people reviewing it last time, they only had one. The test is it has to be the concerns of national security have to outweigh the public interest. There was nobody in the room, either during Trump 1.0 or in general with President Biden, that was representing the public interest. They were all representing the national security interest. And in their mind, if there's a reason, if the national security is at risk, that's in the public interest. So we need, and I've written to the president, I've written to the to the transition team. I've gone through, I was an elector for Bobby Kennedy for New York State.
No, I know that. I signed your petition. I carried your petition.
That's right. Yes. And so I've basically told everybody that if they're going to do a review as opposed to just a simple declassification, we need to have people maybe selected by Bobby Kennedy, who would be a small commission of people that would make these final decisions, because we need like another ARB. If they're going to do a real review, a substantive review as opposed to just releasing the records, we can't trust the intelligence community.
Sure.
Because this is the same community that's been running out the clock for 60 years.
Larry, what is the status of your lawsuit now, and does anything that Trump is doing affect your lawsuit at all?
Well, the lawsuit, we have some motion practice. The government made a motion for dismiss the case and for summary judgment, and we were going to be responding to those motions. But now that the president has issued this executive order, we're probably going to have to wait to see what the plan that the president calls for does. Now, by the way, the 15 days was for the JFK records. The order also provides for 45 days for a plan for the RFK and the MLK records. That's going to be even harder because I don't think we have a good handle. The ARB had to spend a year just getting the agencies to search for their records. And, I think the MLK is probably a little more advanced because the FBI was surveilling him. We have FBI records on Martin Luther King. I don't know what we have about Bobby Kennedy on anything on the federal level.
So, Larry, when do you think, optimistically or realistically, we're likely to see some new documents?
It depends on what the plan is. If the plan is, here's mechanically how we're going to release the records, it could be done in a matter of months or a month. Start, releasing the records. They'll probably do it in batches. Now, what does that mean? Is the archive's going to scan these documents and put them on their website, or are they just going to unredact them and then you have to go physically to the National Archives to see them? I don't know. If there's going to be a substantive review, well, it's going to be a couple months then, because it's going to have to go through. Someone's going to have to set a deadline, a hard deadline for completing the review. So I am hopeful that the president has made it clear enough and that he's got people now on his team. His team isn't in place yet, but the message is being sent that he wants this done. So I'm hoping that in 15 days, the plan's going to say, we plan to advise the National Archives in 2 weeks that they can release the following records, and then maybe do it in batches. I don't know.
One of the things, whenever there's a fresh batch of documents released, one of the things that I feel like some people, and I'm not talking about people that have studied this like you, but laymen who believe that there was a conspiracy always get excited about is, okay, now maybe we'll finally know the truth. Do you believe there's any document or any series of documents that's currently concealed that would be something of a smoking gun, which would lead to acceptance of an alternative view of the single lone gunman theory?
I don't think that there's going to be a smoking gun memo that says, here's how we're going to kill the president. I think there'll be information that could contribute to completing the mosaic of what was going on at the time and what we knew and maybe the hints of what, was going on. But there's not going to be any memo from some mid-level person in the Miami CIA office to Carlos Marcello saying, here's what we're going to do. Thanks for paying for us. Here's the money. Here's how we're going to kill the president. These people were too smart to put things in writing.
I guess then some people may say, and, the talk radio audience is quite capable of being cynical. Some people may say, what's the big deal? Why go to all this effort, you as an individual, the government, the public, to get all these documents released when it's not going to change the public perception of what occurred?
Well, so there's two answers. One is we are entitled to know what happened to our president, number one. And just for our generation that went through this, it'd be nice that we would actually know the truth before we died, number one. Number two, this is not purely a historical event. The killing of the president and the hiding of the truth has created a cancer in our country. And when they learned they can get away with this, then we had the Gulf of Tonkin incident where they made up this, attack on our destroyers to justify going into Vietnam. We had the Sandinistas, right, in the Reagan administration. We had the weapons of mass destruction. And most recently, in 1995, the review board asked the Secret Service to provide their reports of the threat assessments against President Kennedy in the fall of 1963. They destroyed those files. No one ever got punished. Well, January 6th rolls around. The Secret Service has asked for emails, and they're destroyed, and no one gets punished. And at some point, we have to hold people accountable. And I think this country's politics are not going to change, and the way people make decisions in the government is not going to change until people start to be held accountable, if not legally, at least being exposed, to know that they can't hide behind these false secrets to do these nefarious activities and never get caught or exposed. And so I try to tell young people today that this is like when I was growing up, the JFK assassination is as far from this generation as World War I was to my generation.
Wow.
Right? Wow. So like, would I've cared about World War I except as a historical event? No, but World War I did have implications because of what happened that led to World War II and led to the Cold War, right? So you always got to tie what happened in the past to now. So it's important, number one, and look, people are saying, in addition to the JFK records, I want to know about the UFOs. There's a lot of, now I don't want to put the JFK assassination on the same level.
Right, but it's a public interest in disclosure of this kind of thing.
There should be, the American people deserve to know what their government is doing, and as long as decisions are made in secret, there was once a Supreme Court justice who said sunshine is the best disinfectant, and if these people know that they know that their actions and their memos and their decisions are going to be shown to light of day, they may be a little more careful and they may be more thoughtful about things they do, and they may lie less and they may cheat less. Because right now they can hide behind national security and do that. That hides a whole bunch of sins.
Larry, going to have to end it there. I really appreciate the work that you've been doing on this for so many years and your willingness to stay up late and chat about it.
Thanks, and we'll see in 2 weeks if there's anything real.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's reconvene and we can pour over whatever documents are worth pouring over.
Okay, great. All right. Have a good night.
Thank you, Larry Schnapf, one of the best attorneys out there, also an adjunct professor of environmental law. He has been a warrior on this issue for a long time. Hey, if you want to comment, you certainly can do so at 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. Any subject is fair game, even if you want to comment about something else. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.
Plan on flying? It's time to upgrade to a Real ID. Because in order to board domestic flights, your driver's license or state-issued ID must be a Real ID, or you'll need another acceptable form of identification. So don't wait. Find out how to get your Real ID at tsa.gov/RealID. That's tsa.gov/RealID, or visit your local DMV. And then you'll be cleared for takeoff.